You're listening to Titular Characters with your host, the adorable Eva Webb.
Let's talk nerdy things like comic books and superheroes with some nerdy peeps, writers, cartoonists, and so much more. Stick around and have some fun with the lovely and adorable Eva Webb.
Artist Mike Becker is a cartoonist based in the Philadelphia area. After graduating from Savannah College of Art and Design with an MFA in sequential art, Mike has been working as an independent illustrator since 2016. He has done storyboard work for Warner Brothers Animation, as well as self-publishing a book called Young Offenders, a superhero book with more secret comics on the way. And today, we're going to talk to him about art, philosophy, and his influences. This show is going to be a ton of fun. Hey, so a little birdie told me that you've got an exciting Kickstarter going on. What's that about?
Yeah, so me and my writing partner, Mark Stack, and our letterer, Jody Troutman, we have our second Kickstarter up and running right now. We're in our second week. Still got 19 days to go. It's called Young Offenders. It's a young adult teen superhero comic about a bunch of ragtag kids living in this superhero universe who are kind of taking over for their predecessors after the big guns superhero team disappears in a crisis. We did our first campaign last fall, and that was really exciting. Yeah, we're following it up with raising funds for both the second and third issue at the same time.
That's neat. You did some art that really caught my attention on Twitter. That was just hilarious, where you have like these different superhero costume designs, and they all sort of, in a not so subtle way, represent different comics companies like Dark Horse and Valiant, and I thought that was just amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. There was just like an offhanded note that Mark made about in the script about just having some kind of generic superheroes, kind of silly background characters, and I just had fun with it. So I wrote a list of a few different publishers to riff on, and the ones that made it to Twitter were the ones that had kind of easier to translate designs into a character. But yeah, it was fun to poke a little fun at kind of some different publishers and in a loving way. I love all the comics from all those publishers. So yeah, it cracked me up.
That's awesome. So when you draw a comic, do you use are you one of those artists that insists on paper, or do you start digital? What's your process like?
Yeah, I am actually, I guess, about 50-50 traditional and digital. I draw everything, like the physical drawing itself is all, traditional pencil paper. A lot of my stuff is just straight up mechanical pencil, nothing fancy at all. For my comics and my pages, I'll do an underdrawing and colored pencil. And then I take all my drawings and I bring it into Photoshop, and that's where I add the color. So all my colors are digital, and I use the traditional line art.
Is there an emotional place you create your art from?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind would be enthusiasm. I think, especially at least with Young Offenders, I think that's something Mark and I connected over, was our mutual enthusiasm for comics and superheroes. And I think that's just like the attitude I like to bring to my work is, I am enthusiastic about this stuff. I'm excited about being able to be an artist and create. And I love, superheroes, comics, and getting to stretch and play with my imagination. So I like to try to translate my energy into the page when I can, and into my character designs too.
I just love the dynamism of your artwork and how it just sort of jumps out at you.
Thank you. That's something I've really been trying to push recently. Where I think for a long time I was very, you know, panel image. And I went to SCAD for art school for my master's in sequential art, and that was a just a note I got a lot. So, and I know what art speaks to me is stuff like the classics like Jack Kirby, but even modern artists like Jorge Jimenez. They have so much energy and dynamism that I it really speaks to me, and I've been trying to really push my art in that direction to make it a little bit more exciting and challenge myself.
So when you started this project, the one that's in its second and third issue on Kickstarter, what was the seed of inspiration? Where did the world building begin?
So Mark and I connected on Twitter actually last spring, kind of right at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, I had heard him on another podcast. I liked a lot of what he had to say about comics and his creative goals. So I we connected there, and he had said something about wanting to do a teen superhero comic, and that's definitely in my wheelhouse. So I kind of volunteered, if you will, and we started brainstorming not long after. He had this young offenders concept with some characters he had done other stories for, and kind of wanting to build a shared universe for them. So we started there, and I think we have a fun collaborative process where he has an idea, he presents me with an idea, and then I kind of put my own spin on it and try to, amplify it, multiply it by like another concept. And he's very receptive to my ideas. I can't state enough how much I appreciate being involved in the storytelling process and the world building. And I'll find through my designs for the characters, I've found a lot of the world building itself. We really wanted to create a world that felt kind of immediately lived in, and we have those kind of recognizable tropes and archetypes that kind of create familiarity uh, with the visual language of the world. So you're like, oh, this is kind of like a Batgirl character for our Lark character, and that kind of just gives us like a starting point, and then we can take her in our own direction from there.
That sounds really exciting. It's always more fun to read comics that have worlds that feel older than the books themselves.
Yeah, we wanted to kind of establish a history and make it feel lived in without spending too much time on background and history. I think just using simple dialogue notes, and I love to sneak in things in the background because otherwise backgrounds are very difficult for me. Uh, so I like to put art or signs in the streets of New York City that just kind of indicate like what else is going on in this fictional world we have.
So earlier you touched on the collaboration element of creating this. Um, what are the ingredients for a high quality collaboration? Where does that come from?
I think with Mark and I specifically, at least, I think we have a good balance. So I think balance is really key, and we're both really receptive to each other's ideas. I'll throw ideas at him or start working in a direction, and then I'll kind of, before I get too far, I'll bring it to him to make sure I'm keeping in line with his vision or not taking over too much. And he lets me get away with a lot of stuff, or at least enjoys some of the ideas. He'll rein me uh, in some areas, but some designs I started taking in kind of different directions. But I think when working with a collaborator, respecting everyone's role in the process, and letting them do their thing and not trying to micromanage, you know not to speak on any other collaborations I've had, because I'm still very new. I really haven't had too much experience beyond this. When people just want me to be like an art monkey or not even me specifically, but when they're a writer with an idea and they just want, hey, translate exactly what I have. I think that just creates a friction between the creativity process. And I think we just have a really fun garden of creativity to play in and, just bring good energy to it. Um, and it's friendly too. We get along pretty well. Text about comics and stuff.
Nice. So I understand, as far as being, one of the great up and coming artists in the industry right now, you're also a storyboard artist. Um, is creating storyboards vastly different than creating comics?
No, I think they're pretty, you know, tra- uh, translatable skills. I'm still new to storyboarding as well, but I did work for Warner Brothers Animation for a little bit on a up and coming movie, um, and yeah, I think it's all visual storytelling, and storyboarding is less um, illustrative. Where comics, they have to be a finished illustration, and every little illustration has to be a final illustration. But storyboarding, it's a little bit more energetic from my experience, where because I've worked in animation, so it's more about an animated experience, and um, the drawings don't have to be that you know detailed because it's not going to the public. One, it's just kind of a blueprint that you're creating. It's actually a lot more in line with my experience in the process of the thumbnailing stage. I really enjoy mapping out the story and thumbnails, and that's pretty much my storyboarding experience so far. Um, and yeah, I just like to tell stories, and anything I draw has some level of narrative attached to it, at least in my head.
So when you're creating a project, or be it a comic book or anything else, how do you approach diversity and representation in your work?
I think it's just looking at the world, and I've I've been fortunate to meet just so many different types of people from different parts of the world, and I even recognize that my experience is limited. I've only lived in so many places and met so many people, but you know you want everyone to feel included, obviously, and see themselves reflected in art. But I think it's just more honest to create a world that has more than one type of people. And and I think it depends on the story for me, in terms of how much I can speak to anyone's personal experience. I have my own limited uh, viewpoint from just being who I am, uh, but just uh, I want to draw as many different things as possible. It would be boring for me to draw just the same character, the same kind of character over and over. Um, and I think it just makes life, diversity is the spice of life. Variety, and um, wanting to reflect the world that I've enjoyed in terms of getting to experience different cultures and meet different types of people.
Where do you find your creative zen?
Oh, my creative zen. Um,
Yeah.
that is not always easy, actually. I think it depends on how uh, inspired I feel on a day. Some days it just flows right out of me. I can get working right away. Sometimes it takes warm up sketches. I do a lot of warm up sketching, which is where a lot of my character designs come from. Is I'll just start playing around with that, and then I'll end up coloring it. And but a lot of my getting into the groove, I have some playlists that I'll be like, this is my playlist for the day. I'll throw on that, and so I know what I'm listening to, or at least where I'm starting. Um, I love to read comics myself, obviously. So I have a lot around my office, in various piles on floors and any sort of available surface. So just like flipping through those or reading it. I especially based on what projects I'm working on, I definitely curate what um, content I'm consuming, kind of like a diet. I working on young offenders, I'm going to watch or listen to stuff that kind of fuels my imagination in that realm. Um, and coffee helps a lot too. uh, there's almost a ceremony element to the coffee process, other than just the energy
Really?
it brings. Yeah, I just like, okay,
That's
I'm gonna make my
interesting.
coffee, and yeah, and then it's like, okay, I know my day has started.
Nice, nice. I was actually going to ask you about your ritual.
Yeah, I am a very ritualistic person. I give a lot of power to my rituals and routines. Um, I wake up early, exercise for about an hour, and then sometimes it's a nice and easy, smooth transition from one to another. I'd be lying if I said it was always, smooth and rigid. Um, but then I'll get started, and after, I'll make a coffee, I'll sit down, I'll put on a playlist, or I love podcasts just because it's good background noise and I don't have to watch anything, or and I can just focus on what I'm drawing. Um, and then yeah, and then it's just draw time.
Bear with me for a second. You finished your first Kickstarter campaign, and you held that first comic in your hands. What was that feeling when that work was ready to ship?
It was really exciting. I think it was more exciting when I got to see it on the shelf at my local comic book store. I've recently relocated back to my hometown, and this is the store I've gone to since I was, you know, 13. So I was able to give them copies and have something I made up on the shelf there, and that was just it felt like a little trophy for like this work that I had done, and it was my first published comic last fall, so it was a huge moment. It felt like, oh, this is why I do this. It just really rewarding, to kind of get that first uh, checkpoint on my hopefully long career.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
So, do you have you figured out that whether or not you have a type, a particular type or genre of story that you like to work in?
Yeah, I mean, it's I definitely am a superhero guy. That's just the kind of characters I draw and create. It just so much of my artistic DNA comes from superhero comics. And I love all kinds of comics. Not all of it suits my I think talent, or experience at least. Um, I enjoy Western comics, but I'm not as skilled at drawing them. I think you know sci-fi, fantasy, crazy world, superhero stuff, and what I like about superhero stuff, and young offenders specifically, is they're worlds that like anything can happen. Like I can draw, a giant monster. I can draw, just characters hanging out, just like a group of friends, and I think there's just so much uh, flexibility to what I can do with my imagination in just this genre. Um, so that's definitely where I think my sensibilities come from, and definitely lean is enthusiastic, high energy superhero stuff.
Was the experience of creating comics different than you thought it would be?
Um, well, that's a good question. I think it's maybe not necessarily different as much as I just learned, what it is to really make a comic. I had, I made some comics on my own, and I'd always loved reading comics, and I went to school to make comics, but I think making comics for school versus making a comic to be published, it was just kind of like the next step in that experience, kind of like level one, level two. Um, it is a lot of work, and I just because you have to kind of draw everything or anything, um, and really push yourself. I would say anything that I learned, it was all positive. Very, it's just exciting. It's intimidating sometimes at the beginning of a project where it's like, oh, I have a lot to draw, and knowing things that are coming that will just be challenging or a little bit more time consuming. I think that part of the process excites me to approach drawing something new, as long as it's more or less something I know I can or want to draw. Um, and uh and the storytelling process, I think I've learned to push myself into I've leaned heavier into a cartooning angle. I guess I think when I started out drawing, in order to feel like I was going to be taken seriously, I wanted to be, almost Alex Rossian, like a very realistic figure drawing studies in page. I don't think that's where my stuff is now, and I still love that kind of art, and I have a lot to learn figure drawing wise. But I think my where I have gone is more the Alex Toth route, where it's more about the design of a page and the characters, um, and using a little bit more exaggeration and cartooning, and not being so beholden to reality. And that's just been a lot more fun for me. And hopefully it's reads clearer as a comic rather than just a series of pinup illustrations.
So I was looking at your art before this interview, and there was just this one thought that kept running through my head, and it's got this kind of element to it that's really hard to quantify. It's very dynamic. It's very sticky. It almost reminds me of like some of the more dynamic image stuff that came out in the '90s. Um, how do you how do you attain that? Is there a process where you just intentionally say, well, this is going to be a very dynamic layout, and these characters are going to jump right out of the page, or is it the kind of thing that just sort of happens by itself?
I think it really depends on, in terms of where I place the dynamism, or kind of push uh, the action of a moment. I think I let the story lead that. I've come to really like pushing, the anatomy and kind of stretching the characters a little bit more than out of realistic proportions, and taking more risks with the layouts. But I think those pages would be um, the action pages that kind of call for that level of energy. This next chapter of Young Offenders is uh, kind of the calm before the storm, so to speak. The kind of big threat we tease at the end of the first chapter. It's not here yet, but it's looming, and we kind of spend some more time getting to know the characters a little more intimately as people, and that I think doesn't require as much um, hyperkinetic action, and kind of the storytelling rewards more intimate close-up shots of expression and an interaction. Um, so that's been a challenge in itself, just because it's different, and it's more about selling the emotion than the action.
When you're developing a comic, do you think a lot about the differences in workflow between like paper and digital layouts, things like guided reading and how that works, or is it the same process all along for both?
I mean, I think I definitely consider format, like what I want it, kind of that trying to envision the physical or final product of it. With Young Offenders, I know it's going to either PDF or to print, so I know it's kind of just a straight up comic book. I've also worked with kind of a web comic format. I did a web comic of my own, and have something that's similar to a webcomic coming out in the future. That's kind of panel page where you get the kind of reading along, kind of like a guided reading, and then you get the full art at once. And I think that is kind of my ideal way to read a comic digitally. So you kind of get the story almost like it's being played for you, and then you get the experience of the full page at once, where you can kind of control your own reading experience. And because I think that's one of my favorite things about comics, or just what's so unique about comics, is how much the reader has control over their experience. I can control their eye as much as I can with the art and the story flow. But ultimately, if someone spends like 5 minutes on one panel and then rushes through three others, that's where they're bringing themselves into the storytelling process.
It's interesting you should mention that. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I was talking about how, like, when I was a kid and I would read comics, the artist wants you to go panel to panel to panel, but sometimes just inexplicably there's like a panel in the middle of the page that really just sort of hits you and you want to ruminate on it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I did that. I forget what comic I was reading, but you kind of opened the page and one panel just like grabbed me, and I was like, "Whoa!" And I kind of spent some time with that panel, and then I was like, "Oh, right, I was reading this." And then I go back to the kind of top of the page, and then go back to it. And I think that's a fun thing about the language of a comic, because you can kind of build it yourself, like where you get this almost a spoiler, but you can kind of experience the page all at once and then in chunks, or you can kind of see that last panel, turn the page, cliffhanger that you can build into it. And yeah, I think it's just not something you can get from any other type of storytelling. Film, you're watching it, you're a completely passive observer of film, um, or any sort of movie. And even a book, like, you can kind of skip ahead, but it's not really as in your face, as with a comic. The art is just there for you to translate for yourself.
That's so true. So, do you have a favorite comic story or series of all time?
Oh, absolutely. My not exciting answer, because it's just such a it becomes such a big, probably a common one. All-Star Superman. I'm a huge Grant Morrison fan. I read everything that they write, and Frank Quitely is just a master storyteller. The details, and it's just a story that the story itself I really enjoy. I love the character arc, and I am a big Superman fan. And I think it just captures so much of the heart and of the character and the mythology itself. So maybe not an exciting answer. Series wise, um, Invincible, which has just been adapted for Amazon animation, and I'm really digging that so far. But I love Invincible because it takes that superhero world and just kind of really plays with the status quo constantly. And I think that's definitely going, a lot of that comic is going into young offenders, because that's, like I said, it's one of my favorites and just one that I grew up with. And to grow up alongside a character, I think it was my Spider-Man. I think a lot of people a generation older than me got to grow up as Spider-Man a little bit more, but I got to grow up with Invincible, and I just love that nothing ever stayed the same. Even when you kind of want it to, or you expect it to, because it's a superhero comic, but it just always kept things moving.
One thing I love about Invincible is, they have no problem just blowing up their universe from time to time. Doing these things with,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
big world-shattering change.
Yeah, it takes risks, it swings for the fences, and it just doesn't. It's just not that safety net of a status quo world where Bruce Wayne dies, he'll be back. He's not going anywhere for long. But Invincible will just kill its characters or um, blow up an entire city, uh, blow up a planet, and it has consequences. And I think the consequences element to that story is, I think, what's really unique about it in the superhero genre.
So what are you reading right now?
Right now, I just finished all of Hellboy actually because it was a comic
Really?
that obviously, yeah, I was always hyper aware of because it's Hellboy, but I had never read it. I just didn't really know where to start. But it's been collected in omnibus form uh, recently in these really beautiful paperback books. So I just finished volume 4, Hellboy in Hell. So I've completed the whole story, and I think a lot of Mignola's art is bleeding into my inspiration right now, and just his design sensibility and how he builds a page and moments and mood. There's just so much um, atmosphere to the art, and I really enjoyed the story. I thought the it did a lot of like these epic folklorish, uh, you know, it's kind of like an apocalypse story, but it's just this guy kind of bumbling through it. So that I just wrapped up, um, and I picked up the first issue of the new Batman arc by Jorge Jimenez with the Scarecrow, which I also really enjoyed.
So do you have a thought on who might be the most underrated or inspiring comics creator you can think of?
I think actually, I think he's starting to get as rated as he deserves. But I think Doc Shaner, who's working on Strange Adventures at DC right now with Mitch Gerrards, I love his art. I think he's been uh, a rising star for a while. I've been following him online for years. I think his stuff just has so much. Um, it's fun. It's just like really beautiful looking characters, and you can see the fun that he's having with it. And I think he gets almost pigeonholed into that Silver Age vibe that he probably is kind of in his DNA as an artist. But I've been blown away with what he's bringing to this Strange Adventures, and I think I'm just excited to see where he goes next. I think there's a lot of talent throughout all of comics, not just in mainstream big two stuff that I feel like is challenging to me, where I've got to keep up. Like, um, I think we have a lot of talent in the industry right now, which is exciting and intimidating in some ways too.
I bet. So are you ready for the fun part?
Sure.
What's your favorite food?
Honestly, cookies. I am a huge chocolate chip cookie fan. I think if I could eat one last thing before I died, it would be just a batch of cookies all at once.
Wow.
More more food that's like actual, that has any sort of nutritional value. I like chicken parm, kind of classic, but I just like pasta with a good chicken parm.
So would you say you're more of a would you say you're more of a cat person or a dog person?
I am definitely a dog person. I have never had a dog of my own, but I have a lot of friends who have dogs that I love, and that's a goal of mine is to have my own pup. Um, I did live with a cat for a year. A roommate of mine had a cat, which grew on me more than I expected it to. When I first moved in, I was a little hesitant, but I like and respect cats, but I am definitely a dog person.
So what's the best swear word?
Am I allowed to say it?
Of course.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what this podcast was rated. I think shit is very versatile, and it's just like, ah, shit, or uh,
That is awesome. That's awesome. So what inspires you?
big question. Obviously, a lot of other art and other comics and just kind of any sort of media definitely fuels my imagination. But I think what fuels just a lot of my life and my thinking is the beauty in everything. I guess that sounds so cheesy, but I just love the concept of the infinity and just that whatever can be possible could be possible. I like science a lot, and I listen to a lot of science lectures when I draw. Um, and multiverse theory is a big thing in comics, and that definitely fascinates me in my scientific curiosities. So I think just keeping an open mind to lots of different ideas, and experiencing what the world has to offer or could offer, that's what keeps me really inspired as in life and in art.
So, what brings you joy?
It's got heavier than I expected. I think again, simple things can really bring me joy. I think that's I love looking at my shelf of comics, um, and just time with my family, especially this last year. The pandemic was pretty intense for everybody, and my life kind of got uprooted a little bit, moved home, and um, I'm back in my childhood bedroom. No shame there. I think a lot of people are in my situation. But it really allowed me to take stock of what I have and who I have in my life, and be really grateful for that. And I think when I reflect on that, which I find myself doing a lot, that brings me a lot of joy, and how much I am fortunate to still have, um, and what I get to do. Like, I get to draw comics, and it's a lot of work, but it's exciting work. Um, and I feel really lucky to be able to do this.
That's amazing. And you're doing just such great work. If you could change one detail, you think, about living on planet Earth in current year 2021, what do you think it would be?
Oof. How do I save the world with one wish? Um, I think I think if our ability to communicate with each other, I think that is really the source of any sort of strife or problem. Just comes from a lack of ability to communicate clearly or um, deeply. And it's tough. People have whatever language they come to a problem with, and I think if we could all speak to each other respectfully and um, or at all, to be able to communicate with each other would just I think it would build a lot of bridges.
You wake up one morning and you are imbued with the superpowers of your choice. What are those powers, and what do you choose to do with them?
My normie answer for talking to non-comics people is just telekinesis, because that's one that I think people are generally familiar with. But my real answer is I want Green Lantern's powers, because
There you go.
he can kind of do anything. He can fly. He can build. I love the building energy structures. I think that's just so cool and really fun to draw too. um, but I think I would use that almost unlimited power to kind of to build and create. Especially as an artist, I think my a lot of my ideas for the world come from what can I create or build with what I have. So if I had more, I think that's what I would do. I don't know where I'd start, because there's a lot to tackle in terms of the world. I'd at least start with building a house for myself, somewhere I can live and enjoy my own like studio and life in a cool place. So I guess that's where I'd start.
Nice, and with a Green Lantern power ring, you could build a house on the side of a mountain. It would make something just amazing if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. I could probably have a few houses. One underwater on the moon. It could get pretty cool.
It could. So, as far as that goes, do you see yourself as somebody who's heroic or somebody who's not especially heroic? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Oh, I mean, everyone thinks that they're really heroic, or wants to be, or well, maybe not everybody. I mean, I definitely, especially as a superhero guy, I think there's part of me that aspires to be heroic. I I have a few rescuing drunk girl stories from college where I just made sure people got home safely. um, Not that I was looking for backpats or anything like that. Um, but I think I that heroic inspiration for comics is it's just about helping people. There's obviously the crime fighting element, but I think why Superman is my favorite is he's just here to help, and he's the guy who can do anything, so he can do anything and everything to help people. And I like to think that I try to do what I can to help with the powers I have, whether that's I guess art and bringing some of myself into the world, or listening. A lot of my friends love to tell me their problems, which I am happy to listen to, but it is that is my cross to bear in life. Is I'm the therapist friend.
It's interesting you should put it that way. I am too, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, that probably suits the having a podcast. People come to talk to you a lot, I guess.
It does. People tell me they like my voice, you know. So here's the last heavy one. 100 years from now, um, NASA takes your lifetime of creative output, tosses it into a space capsule, and launches it deep into space. At some point later, it reaches far enough into space that either very sophisticated aliens read it, or it ends up crashing on a planet where new aliens might read it. But either way, what's their thought? What do they think of your work?
They think I'm a nerd. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I think, um, well, I guess they'd start building a society of superheroes, because that's mostly my output so far, and a lot of what I have planned and hope to work on is more superhero stuff. So maybe it's a little bit more altruistic of a alien world, hopefully for our sake at least.
I like that. I like that a lot. So, what is the secret sauce? How does a comic by Mike Becker stand out from the crowd?
Um, ooh. I think I like to bring um I think the enthusiasm that I like to bring to it, I think that hopefully translates and is maybe unique to me. Um, I don't I like to take pre-existing ideas and really put as much spin on them as possible. I in my head I call it it's multiplication versus addition. There's that elevator pitch math that people talk about with their story ideas when they're trying to describe what their comic concepts, or whatever kind of story concept, like it's this thing meets this thing. And I like to think that I do multiplication. It's this times this, uh, plus this plus that. I like to jam as much into it as possible. So I think a lot of what I will bring to the table is a little bit more. It's just new combinations of ideas. I think that's all we can really do as creators is to make something new. You've got to build with the toys you're given, and bring what it says about you. Storytelling wise, I like those big epic mythological stories that speak to kind of archetypal um, narratives. So I'd like to represent that with maybe some new ideas from stuff that I love.
So you've got this Kickstarter project going on. What's next? Where do you go after that?
Well, this is going to take me a few months to wrap up. We still have 19 days to go. I'm still working on the pages for it now. Kind of planning to get it funded. Please check us out. To anyone listening, I think if you've enjoyed what I have to say, I think you'll find a lot of that reflected in our story. Um, and what's after this, I have a personal project of my own. I'm working on. I don't know how much I can say there, but uh, I'm trying to make as many connections as possible, and I just want to make art. That's been my guiding light. Is just when I focus on letting the work lead, that's when I've really found a lot of success. So hopefully, I'll get more of my own stuff out there, and um, you know, bring that to an audience, that's just waiting for me.
Well, Mike, I just wanted to tell you that it has been just an honor and a pleasure to have you on my humble little show. Thank you for coming by.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. This was such a great way to spend my afternoon.
Likewise. So where can people find you online?
They can find me on Twitter at Mike J. Becker, or on Instagram at Mike Becker14. Um, I have a website, mikejbecker.com. That's just kind of a portfolio site, but my socials are mostly Twitter and Instagram focused. Follow me there. I post pretty much anything I draw up on there. You'll sometimes see me at brunch on Instagram, but otherwise, it's mostly art themed.
Just a quick update on this one. I had a couple of weeks where I wasn't feeling too hot, and I wasn't able to get this episode produced before the end of the Young Offenders Kickstarter campaign. I did talk to Mike before posting this, and what he told me was that the book will be available later this summer from weekendwarriorcomics.com. And the link is in the description. So that's it, babies. Love ya. And that's it, my babies. It's time to close the show. I wanted to thank you for being gorgeous, being valid, and living your best life. This episode was part of Batch 34. Titular Characters is a show about the things we love. It's produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. That's me. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The drummy announcer guy at the beginning of the show is Donnie Underwood, who's pretty amazing. So, have you thought about supporting the show? There are tons of ways to do it. You can show your support by following me at Eva is Adorable on Twitter, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, CastBox, or Podchaser. And if you're feeling like you'd like to help out financially, you could visit us at buymeacoffee.com/Eva is Adorable, because I am. There, you can donate as little as $1, and all proceeds go towards the cost of producing and hosting this show. Every little bit helps, and you are amazing for even considering it. Anyway, babies, that's all we got. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. Oh, and when you do, bring candy. Love yas.